Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic Hypersonic.
I'm Barry P. Cook, and I want to talk about the latest episode of Doom Patrol. It was called Tomb Patrol. And as it starts, we see an operative running from and then shooting a butt, thinking he's killed the last one. But then one more, going by the name of Teddy, approaches him and engages him in conversation before revealing that there are, in fact, quite a bit more butts that need to be contended with. And to that end, Teddy says that he needs the man to help him find someone. Victor visits his dad at Star Labs after asking him to meet him there and explains that he hasn't found happiness since taking all of his tech out the way he thought he would. His father says he won't make the decision for him again, but he was relieved when Victor gave up the tech because he knew it would mean that Victor wouldn't be risking his life every day, and he encourages him to pick a hobby or start a business because the fact is he was risking his life every day anyway, even without the tech, because he wanted to help people and still does. Meanwhile, Immortus shows up at the mansion and barges her way in despite Laura's best efforts to keep her out. She says she's realized that it wasn't super cool to force all of humanity to love her, and that if she wants humanity's respect, she's going to have to get it legitimately. And apparently, to this end, she's putting on a one-woman show that she's now inviting the Doom Patrol to. At the same time, Larry is digging his own grave, much to the dismay of Mr. 104, who himself is probably also about to die, causing him to make a plan to do it out in the Bay of Bengal and then turn himself into a block of lead. Laura informs Rita about the invitation, which Rita seems uninterested in as she's trying to make a big family dinner for the household members so they can spend time together before they all croak. Jane starts playing around with all the puzzle pieces in her room and finds herself transported to the underground, where she finds only outfits that used to belong to the other identities. She calls out to them, but no one responds, and she seems to have some kind of vision of a man leading the child that all the personalities protect out of the room that she's in. Cliff snaps her out of this vision and invites her to go with him to Florida to see his daughter, but Jane is not interested until he mentions that on the way they could stop and blow up some toilets with M80s. Laura calls a meeting and explains to Rita, Larry, and Cliff that while Isabel was in the time stream for 1,000 years, she got something stuck to her neck, which is what's making her Immortus and giving her her powers, which she knows from going through Wally's research that they took from the ant farm. She also tells them that whatever it is that's on the back of her neck is what was inside of all of the Doom Patrol members, giving them the longevity, and she wants to see if she can get the one off the back of Isabel's neck so they can try to get their longevity back. Cliff says he isn't interested because he wants to spend the rest of his time with his family. Larry says he needs to find a good solution for what's going to become of Keegan before he dies, so he can't risk his life chasing this thing. Rita then says that they should just leave Isabel alone after all she's been through. Jane and Cliff start their journey down to Florida, while Isabel puts on a preview of her weird one-woman show, which Laura is the only member of the Doom Patrol to attend, alongside very few other people who all laugh at her when it ends, though Laura tells her she loved it. At the same time, the lady from the first part of the season, the one who had domesticated one of the butts, returns home and lets the butt, whose name is Nicholas, know that Teddy is alive and that he sent her a note for Nicholas saying that it's time to rise up, which Nicholas thinks is crazy and rejects signing on to, before he learns the hard way that the woman he's been spending his time with has now become a butt herself right before his eyes. Jane tells Cliff that she thinks she has dementia and that she's been hearing a voice that says, "Say it," which is apparently coming from whoever the man in her vision is. Laura and Isabel talk about how hard it is to win people over, and Laura expresses a feeling of missing the Brotherhood of Evil where she was accepted. Isabel seems to think that what she needs to do now is make people fear her if she wants to be loved, which she thinks she can do by becoming a supervillain, which she tries to recruit Laura into helping her with, which Laura initially rejects. Despite the fact that he doesn't eat, Larry joins Rita at the table where she was sitting alone, eating the feast that she prepared, and explains that he's been in the professor's office trying to find information on where Keeg is actually from. Rita gets upset with him, though, because he keeps talking about death like everyone else when all she wants is for people to just be there for her and with her. Apparently, Nicholas's lady friend is not entirely a butt as much as a werebutt because of Teddy, whom Nicholas vows to deal with. Larry and Rita make up from their earlier fighting. They're joined by Cliff and Jane, who it turns out didn't get very far in their trip to Florida and ended up turning back, at which point they start to reminisce about prior times, including how they once ate Niles. While this is happening in Jane's room, the puzzle starts putting itself together. When the team realizes where Laura is, Rita decides to go and help her since she figures that what Laura's trying to do is get their longevity back, but no one wants to go with her, and in fact, she passes out herself on her way to make the attempt. It looks like Laura bought into Isabel's plan of being her sidekick or helper as she and Isabel brainstorm about how to carry out Isabel's latest plan. But at the end of the planning session, Isabel inadvertently shows Laura the back of her neck where the doohickey is. Cliff, Jane, and Larry carry Rita off to bed as she seems to be dying, at which point they seem to decide to go down to the theater to try to get their longevity back from the thing on the back of Isabel's neck, even though originally they said they didn't want to bother with it. When they arrive, they're confronted by the werebutt army. Laura turns the tables on Isabel and manifests a sword at the end of her arm using her shapeshifter abilities. Just as the butts attack Cliff, Larry, and Jane, CYBORG shows up with his tech back and blasts them, but then they all have to run inside the theater because there's so many butts. Of course, they then find Laura and Isabel locked in confrontation. Upon seeing the team there, Isabel opens a portal and sends them into a time vortex along with Laura, and that's where the episode ended. So sadly, I didn't think much of this episode. There just wasn't anything to it that had any real impact in any way. I mean, the same was really true of last week's episode, but at least there we had fun musical numbers. No musical numbers this week, and it was just more of these characters despairing over and over again. That's all they did for 4 seasons was despair over stuff. And it's just so tiring. They didn't even have Casey and Dorothy in the episode, which I think would have made it a little bit brighter, but they left them out. So there just wasn't very much to it. I mean, it was fun seeing the butts again, so that's good. And, the whole where butt thing is interesting, right? So now there are people, but they've been bitten by a butt, so they turn into butts. It was nice to see the moment where the team members were kind of reminiscing fondly, and Michelle Gomez is always a joy to watch, but there was nothing to it. I suppose I'm slightly curious as to what's going on with Jane, why she can't access the other personalities, but even that's not worth a whole hell of a lot. I'd rather just see the personalities. What's with the mystery? Why are we doing this? And I couldn't be arsed about Larry and his love relationship with Mr. 104. It's just not compelling to me. The part where Isabel was doing her one-woman show was kind of funny, but even then, it wasn't much of anything. And I don't know, this episode just wasn't great. They got cast into a time vortex, so maybe that will be interesting next week. And we did see some clips of next week in the preview at the end of this week's episode. So some of that stuff looked interesting. The professor's going to be back, so maybe next week will be good. And then there's going to be the series finale the following week. So I don't know, maybe we'll get something good out of the final season of the show before it ends, but I don't know. I'm not terribly hopeful. I really just didn't think much of it. I wish they had had Casey and Dorothy in it. I don't know. It just seems like they're treading water and they're not doing it very well. And that's unfortunate because the show started out so well in the first and second season. But that's really it. There isn't much more to say. So I'm going to get out of here. I'll be back to review next week's episode once it's released. Until I return, I wish you peace and long life.